Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Karen McKinney. So much is happening that it's hard to keep up with it all. But one of the many promises that President Trump is keeping is to our service members who lost their pay, their rank, and even their ability to serve in the military over Biden's COVID-19 vaccine mandate, which was later overturned. That's where things stood for a while as recruitment and retention numbers continued to plummet. Those service members who were kicked out so nastily were then even asked by the Biden administration to come back. But come back to what? The threat of this happening again? There were never any real apologies, no restoration of anything that was taken from them so wrongly. President Trump, though, is changing all of that by having the military actually truly apologize and reinstate rank and pay. And speaking of the recruitment crisis, President Trump also fired the Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard, Linda Fagan, in part over that very issue. Her laundry list of failures, though, is manifold. It also includes her obsession with DEI and her failure to use the Coast Guard to protect our shorelines from boats of illegal aliens smuggling both humans and drugs. Which, side note, turns out there are ongoing protests outside the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City where they're beating up a piñata, as you can see, of President Trump and even setting it ablaze. And I just have to say, they aren't making a really good case for themselves with this. Basically, the message is, I hate the will of the American people, which is what President Trump symbolizes, and I demand entrance into your country to change what you want into what I want, even though I have my own country to do whatever I want in, but you're not allowed to have your own country to do whatever you want in. An ex account I like to follow called Mimetic Sisyphus posted simply, quote, Mexicans living in Mexico protesting another country's leader for telling them to live in Mexico, end quote. Craziness all around. So joining us now to discuss all this and more is military defense attorney Davis Younts. Davis, thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening, Kara. It's an honor.
Great. So I keep using this word this week, but so many of my guests are being vindicated, and you, of course, are when it comes to President Trump's announcement for service members affected by Biden's COVID mandate. What does it mean in concrete terms for some of the clients that you've represented on this very issue for so many years?
It is, vindication is a great word to use, but this is a restoration of faith with military members who were discriminated against. Their religious faith was called into question. This was a purge of Christians. Had so many clients that were subjected to threats and coercion. And now you're looking at a commander-in-chief, a president of the United States, who's saying to these people, you were wronged. And we're going to do everything in our power to make it right and apologize for the way you were treated. So it is absolutely a vindication, and it's very encouraging. It's going to be interesting to see the details of how this is carried forward, but it's an exciting thing, and it's just amazing after everything I fought for to get to retirement, all of the work that was done for thousands, just to be in a place where the president is looking us in the eye and saying, I recognize this was wrong and I'm going to make it right.
And that's what we love to see. Do you know of anyone so far who's telling you, hey, I want to take this deal whenever and however it comes about. I want to be reinstated at rank and pay and I'm ready to serve again. Are you hearing that from some of your clients or friends or just anyone you know?
Yes, it's a resounding yes. It's very, very different than what happened during the Biden administration, where individuals were being begged to come back in, but there was no recognition, there was no apology, there was no guarantee of reinstatement or back pay or anything else. And so, yes, I've been fielding phone calls today. I know of many of my clients, several Navy SEALs, Coast Guard rescue swimmers, these heroes that are ready. They were kicked out and they are ready to come back in. So I'm very encouraged by that. And there's just a sense of a restoration of the right priorities throughout the Department of Defense that's encouraging. I think it's going to have a huge impact on recruiting moving forward. So again, don't know what all the details of this are going to look like, but this is a huge number of people. I think there was approximately 100,000 that were forced out of the military through early retirements, denials of reenlistment and things like that aren't even accounted for in the Pentagon's numbers, that are all going to be looking at this and saying, okay, I'm ready to serve again. Let's go and let's make things right.
And these 7,000 or 8,000 or so service members, I mean, by and large, these are the types of people we want serving in the military. These are the types of people we want moving up the ranks of the military so that they can call the shots, because by and large, like you said, many of these are Christians, are faithful Christians, are people who love their nation, are people who like to think critically about what's being told to them. Again, these are the types of people that we want in power. And I think it speaks to a deeper issue when it comes to the retention crisis of once someone's been recruited, of keeping them in the military, right? My brother, I've talked before about before, served in the Marine Corps, and he went abroad. He did all sorts of things, right? And so he was on the ship a lot. And he was talking to other Marines. He was talking to a lot of guys in the Navy as well. And one thing that you found are the grunts, the boots, the infantry guys. I mean, they just get ground under time and time again. A lot of them end up phasing out because they're sick of how they're being treated. And then you see those in the military who'll sit there on ship for months saying, I hate America. Marxism's actually pretty cool. And they have all these bizarre ideas. But they usually take a simpler route, if you will, more desk jobs through the military. And so they stay for longer. But what does that mean? They move up, and now they're the ones calling the shots. So once again, the loop happens where a young 18-year-old starry-eyed kid who loves his country and he wants to serve his nation, he gets put in there, and now he's being told, oh, you see this man over here? You have to call him ma'am. You have to say, you can't say sir, you have to say ma'am. And it goes on and on like that. And I think that's a lot of the rot. And again, this COVID vaccine mandate, it really weeded out a lot of those good guys that we needed in those positions of power. So do you think, again, with these guys coming back now, and with President Trump now getting rid of, as we saw the Coast Guard commandant saying, hey, you're prioritizing DEI over American national interests, well, then you're gone. Do you think that will help to really make our military stronger and really get back to that military readiness we lost under Biden?
I do believe that. Listen, firing the Coast Guard commandant sends a signal to the force that bureaucrats who are prioritizing Marxist progressivism and DEI over lethality and the mission, combat readiness, that there is no place for them in the military anymore. And we have a huge problem with bureaucrats, lifelong career bureaucrats in the military, like Mark Milley, for example, that are cowards in a uniform, that are not willing to do the right things and actually win our nation's wars and protect our borders. So I do think this sends a very, very strong signal. And just an example of that, we have more admirals in the Navy right now, more serving admirals than we actually do functioning ships. So when President Trump comes out, and one of the first things he does is say, listen, the Coast Guard has a responsibility to be on a war footing to counter terrorist cartels and actually protect our nation's borders. And we have a leader in the Coast Guard who's not capable of doing that and hasn't made the right things a priority. Sending a strong message that there will be accountability for those senior leaders is encouraging. It does improve morale, and it puts an emphasis on lethality and the warfighter, which is what we need. And that's what the boots on the ground troops want to see. They want to know they will be heard. They want to know, for example, they have a Secretary of Defense who can still do push-ups and who understands what rounds are put in munitions and understand what it's like to do those jobs. So I think that's very encouraging. I think it's going to have a huge impact on morale and recruiting.
That it will. And just lastly, before I let you go as well tonight, a lot of those ground troops, one thing that they complain about, right, is the pay and living conditions. I mean, if you're being served undercooked chicken, a huge salmonella risk, and you're living in barracks that have black mold, I mean, you get a little cranky about that, and I think rightfully so. I know my brother, at the time before Afghanistan fell, being shipped out there, and he was showing me some of the gear they were giving him, and he's like, look at this stuff. This is from 2004. I mean, they weren't even getting new equipment to go fight a war. I mean, it was the end and they were pulling out, but still, it's still a hot zone. The Taliban was getting closer and closer to Kabul. We saw how that happened, how that ended so terribly, but where's the money going? Because it's not going to the guys who need the money. So then the question is, where is it going? And of course, we all know the answer to that one. So just about a minute left on the clock. I know a new report coming out about what's going on with the Ukraine money and all the billions that we sent under Biden. And they found that Ukraine's chief army psychologist has been arrested now. And it's because he's accused of stealing about $1 million in foreign war aid. And with that money, he's being accused of buying apartment buildings, not just an apartment, but buildings, right? BMWs, had 150,000 stashed at home. I mean, it's literally insane. And just like I said, in about a minute here, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, the impact of this is huge. Your point is absolutely right. I have Navy SEAL clients who only go out and buy equipment on the market off the shelf because it's better than the equipment they're issued. I mean, the best of the best Navy SEALs do that on a regular basis because the government issued equipment isn't up to the standards that they need for the mission. And yet we see billions of dollars being dumped into Ukraine with no accountability, and you see this money lying around, and that impacts our warfighters. So again, there's a lot of work to be done, but I am excited to see what can happen with people who are motivated for the right reasons, who are willing to recognize the principles of our founding fathers and understand we have to take care of our warfighters. We have to stand by them and equip them so that they can fight and win our nation's wars.
I guess that's the other word of the week, optimism, as you're expressing. Vindication and optimism. I love it. Davis, always a pleasure. Thanks for making time for us tonight.
It's left to men like Davis Younts to fight for these Navy SEALs.
Are Davis Younts, you are an attorney who has successfully defended naval officer.
Davis Younts has been instrumental in defending service members.
Davis Younts successfully defended an evangelical Navy lieutenant.